The Forgotten Hero. The autumn wind whipped through the open corridors of Westfield Shopping Center, carrying with it the scent of fallen leaves and the distant hum of traffic. Inside, the familiar sounds of commerce filled the air. Children's laughter, the clatter of shopping carts, and the constant murmur of hundreds of conversations blending into white noise. But in the food court, near the back entrance where the foot traffic was lighter, a different scene was unfolding. A frail figure lay curled on a wooden bench, his weathered hands clutching a torn blanket around his shoulders. His clothes were dirty, his hair unkempt, and his face bore the deep lines of someone who had seen too much and slept too little. Marcus Wellington, the mall's head security guard, approached with heavy steps and an expression of practiced authority. He'd been doing this job for 15 years, and he'd seen it all. But lately, the number of homeless individuals seeking shelter in the mall had been increasing, and management was putting pressure on security to keep them moving. "Sir," Marcus called out, his voice echoing slightly in the space. "Sir, you can't sleep here. This is private property." The old man stirred but didn't respond. His eyes remained closed, his breathing shallow but steady. Marcus stepped closer, his radio crackling to life. "Security to dispatch. I've got an unhoused male in the food court area, refusing to move. Possible intoxication or medical issue. May need backup." The static-filled response came quickly. "Copy that, Marcus. Unit 47 is en route." A small crowd had begun to gather at a respectful distance. Shoppers paused in their errands, some pulling out phones to record, others simply staring with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. A mother quickly ushered her children away, whispering something about not staring at people. Marcus sighed, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes on him. He'd been in situations like this before, but something about this particular man gave him pause. There was something almost dignified about the way he lay there, despite his obvious circumstances. "Sir," Marcus tried again, this time placing a gentle hand on the man's shoulder. "I'm going to need you to wake up. The police are coming, and it'll be easier for everyone if you cooperate." The old man's eyes finally opened, revealing a pair of pale blue irises that seemed to hold depths of experience. He looked up at Marcus with a mixture of confusion and resignation. "I wasn't bothering anyone," he said quietly, his voice hoarse but clear. "Just needed a place to rest." "I understand that, sir, but you can't stay here. There are shelters downtown, places that can help you." The man slowly sat up, the blanket falling away to reveal a thin frame beneath layers of worn clothing. As he moved, something caught the light around his neck, a thin chain with what appeared to be a small metal tag. Just then, the sound of footsteps approached from behind. 2 police officers had arrived, their uniforms crisp and their expressions professionally neutral. The older of the two, Sergeant Rodriguez, had been on the force for over 20 years. His partner, Officer James Mitchell, was relatively new, only 3 years on the job, but he carried himself with the confidence of someone who took his duties seriously. "What's the situation here?" Sergeant Rodriguez asked, addressing Marcus. "Homeless individual refusing to leave private property. He seems cooperative now, but management wants him removed." Officer Mitchell stepped forward, his hand resting casually on his belt. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us. We can take you to a shelter, get you some help." The old man looked up at them, his eyes moving from one officer to the other. There was no defiance in his gaze, only a deep weariness that seemed to go beyond physical exhaustion. "I served too, you know," he said quietly, almost to himself. Mitchell was about to respond when something caught his eye. As the man shifted position, the chain around his neck moved, and the small metal tag became more visible. It was a military dog tag, dented and worn, but unmistakably authentic. Mitchell's hand moved instinctively toward the tag, then stopped. "Sir, may I see your identification?" The old man's weathered fingers fumbled with the chain, eventually lifting the dog tag so it could be seen more clearly. Mitchell leaned in, squinting at the small scratched metal surface. Years of wear had made much of the text illegible, but one name stood out clearly enough to read. Mitchell's face went pale. He stared at the tag, then at the man's face, then back at the tag. "What is it?" Sergeant Rodriguez asked, noticing his partner's sudden change in demeanor. Mitchell's voice was barely above a whisper. "Thompson. James Thompson." The name hung in the air like a revelation. Mitchell took a step back, his hand moving unconsciously to his own chest, where beneath his uniform shirt lay a photograph he'd carried for years, a picture of his father as a young soldier in Vietnam. "Sir," Mitchell said, his voice cracking slightly, "what's your first name?" The old man looked up, confused by the sudden intensity in the officer's voice. "James. James Thompson. People called me Jimmy back then." Mitchell's legs nearly gave out. He reached for the nearby pillar to steady himself, his mind racing with memories of bedtime stories, of his father's voice recounting tales from the war, of one name that had been repeated over and over throughout his childhood. "Jimmy Thompson," Mitchell repeated, more to himself than to anyone else. "The Jimmy Thompson who served in the 25th Infantry Division? Vietnam 1968? The old man's eyes widened slightly. "How could you possibly know that?" Mitchell pulled off his patrol cap, running his fingers through his hair. The crowd around them had grown larger, sensing that something significant was happening. Smartphones were recording, capturing a moment that none of them fully understood yet. "Because," Mitchell said, his voice growing stronger, "my father is David Mitchell. Sergeant David Mitchell. He served with you in Cu Chi. You saved his life when their convoy was ambushed near the Cambodian border." The silence that followed was profound. Even the ambient noise of the mall seemed to fade as everyone within hearing distance processed what they had just witnessed. James Thompson's face changed completely. The weariness didn't disappear, but it was joined by something else. Recognition, hope, and a flicker of the man he had once been. "David Mitchell," he whispered, his voice filled with wonder. "Little Davy from Chicago. Always talking about his girl back home, about the kids he was going to have someday." Mitchell nodded, tears beginning to form in his eyes. "That's him. That's my dad. He's told me that story 100 times. How you pulled him out of that burning truck. How you carried him to safety while under enemy fire. How you saved not just his life, but the lives of his future family." The two men stared at each other across a gap of decades, each seeing in the other's face the echo of people they had loved and lost and found again. Sergeant Rodriguez, who had been watching this exchange with growing amazement, quietly keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. Cancel any additional units. We have the situation under control." Marcus, the security guard, stepped back, his earlier authority completely evaporated. The crowd pressed closer, but their energy had shifted from mere curiosity to something approaching reverence. Mitchell knelt down beside the bench, bringing himself to eye level with the old veteran. "Sir, with your permission, I'd like to take off these handcuffs I was about to put on you." James Thompson held up his hands, showing that he had never been cuffed. "You didn't cuff me, son. You saw who I was first." Mitchell nodded, then began to remove his own jacket. "Here, let me give you this. It's cold in here." "You don't need to do that." "Yes, I do." Mitchell wrapped the jacket around the old man's shoulders. "You're not alone anymore, Mr. Thompson. You're not alone." The crowd had grown to include dozens of shoppers, employees, and even some of the mall's management. Word was spreading quickly through social media, and the story was beginning to take on a life of its own. A woman in the crowd stepped forward. "Excuse me, officers. I work for the VA. If this gentleman needs assistance, I can help connect him with services." Another voice called out, "I'm a veteran too. Korean War. Is there anything I can do?" And then another, "My husband served in Vietnam. We'd like to help." Mitchell looked around at the growing crowd, then back at James Thompson. "Sir, I'd like to call my father. Would you be willing to speak with him?" The old man's eyes filled with tears. "I'd like that very much." As Mitchell pulled out his phone, Sergeant Rodriguez addressed the crowd. "Folks, we're going to need some space here. This is a very personal moment for these gentlemen." But the crowd didn't disperse. Instead, they formed a respectful circle, giving the two men privacy while still bearing witness to something extraordinary. Mitchell dialed his father's number. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "Dad, it's James. I need you to sit down. I'm here with someone you need to talk to." He handed the phone to James Thompson, whose weathered hands shook as he brought it to his ear. "David? Is that really you?" The voice on the other end was older now, but still unmistakably the same young soldier who had served beside him all those years ago. "Jimmy? Jimmy Thompson? Where have you been, brother? We've been looking for you for 30 years. The conversation that followed was private, heard only by the two men who had found each other across decades of loss and separation. But everyone in the mall could see the transformation in James Thompson's face as he spoke with his old friend. When the call ended, Mitchell helped the old veteran to his feet. "Mr. Thompson, my father wants to see you. He's asked me to bring you home. I don't want to be a burden. You could never be a burden. Your family." As they walked toward the exit, the crowd parted respectfully. Some applauded quietly, others simply nodded. A few veterans in the crowd stood at attention, offering silent salutes. The mall security guard, Marcos, approached them as they reached the door. "Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry about earlier. I didn't know." James Thompson paused and looked at the younger man. "You were just doing your job, son. No need to apologize." "Yes, there is," Marcus replied. "We all need to do better." Outside, the autumn air felt different somehow. Mitchell helped James Thompson into the passenger seat of his patrol car, making sure he was comfortable before closing the door. Sergeant Rodriguez pulled his partner aside. "What are you doing? We can't just leave duty like this. My father is waiting for us at home. He's been waiting for 30 years. Rodriguez looked at the old man sitting in the patrol car, then at his partner's face. After a moment, he nodded. "Take him home, Mitchell. I'll handle the paperwork." The drive across town was quiet, filled with the comfortable silence of two people who had been through something profound together. James Thompson stared out the window at the familiar streets of a city that had changed dramatically since he'd last really seen it. Your father, he said quietly, was he able to have those kids he talked about? Mitchell smiled. 3 of them. I'm the youngest. He named me after you. James? James David Mitchell. He wanted to make sure I always knew about the man who saved my family. When they pulled into the driveway of a modest suburban home, Mitchell could see his father waiting on the porch. David Mitchell was in his 70s now, his hair white and his frame smaller than it had been in his youth. But as he saw the patrol car pull up, he straightened with something of his old military bearing. The reunion that followed was private and profound. 2 old soldiers recognizing each other not just in their aged faces, but in their shared history of service, sacrifice, and survival. Later that evening, as the news of the story spread through social media and local news outlets, veterans organizations began reaching out. The VFW offered assistance. The American Legion provided support. Local businesses offered jobs and housing. But perhaps most importantly, James Thompson was no longer alone. He had found not just his old friend, but a new family, in a community that recognized his service and his worth. Weeks later, at a ceremony honoring local veterans, James Thompson stood on a stage wearing a new suit and his old dog tags freshly cleaned and polished. Officer James Mitchell stood beside him, along with his father and the rest of their family. The mall security guard, Marcus, had used his influence to establish a new protocol for dealing with homeless individuals, especially veterans. The mall now partnered with local social services to provide assistance rather than simply removal. And in the food court, where it all began, a small plaque was installed near the bench where James Thompson had been found. It read simply, "No one who has served their country should ever be forgotten." The story became a reminder that heroes can be found in the most unexpected places, that service and sacrifice deserve recognition and respect, and that sometimes the most profound acts of heroism are simply seeing the humanity in others and responding with compassion. In the end, it wasn't just about one homeless veteran finding help. It was about a community rediscovering its values, a family reuniting across decades, and the simple but powerful truth that no one should be forgotten, especially those who have given so much in service to others. The forgotten hero had been found, not just by his old friend's son, but by an entire community that chose to see his worth and honor his service. And in doing so, they reminded everyone that heroism isn't just about grand gestures in times of war, but about the everyday choice to treat each other with dignity, respect, and love.